listening to Bob Harden, streaming live online at bobharden.com.
Thanks for joining us this morning. Andrew Joppa is a former college professor at Mercy College. He's a constitutional scholar. I had the opportunity to see him speak about the Constitution. I think it was actually with Bob Levy. The two spoke at a Patriot meeting in Naples. And just the other day, he had an opportunity to, I'm going to say, interview or perhaps test one of our candidates in Congress about the Constitution. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bob.
So, give us a context for this. What happened?
Well, this was an event by the Council for Constitutionals. I'm a board member. I'm considered the constitutionalist, if that's accurate, by them. And so we had a night at the VFW here in Naples, and I was interviewing Byron Donalds in front of a group of about 100 people, and it was just a one-to-one conversation, and it went about an hour. And that's the context. So let me leave it there for you to.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about. I know that I had the opportunity to moderate a panel of 8 congressional candidates. It was bipartisan. There was a Democrat, there was an independent, and others, mostly, however, Republican candidates. And as I went through the process, I went from being a neutral moderator. In other words, my job was to help each candidate, express themselves to the audience so they could make their own decisions. By the end of the panel, Byron Donalds, in my view, was just head and shoulders above the other candidates in terms of his demeanor, his composure, his deportment, what he had to say, his thoughtfulness, and so forth. And I just withdrew from moderating future forums and decided I'm going to support Byron Donalds.
Yeah, Bob, that's very similar to what I went through. I prepare fairly thoroughly for an event like this. It was just me and Byron Donalds. So I looked at his website, I read his vision statement, did as much background work as I could. I was impressed by the literature and the writing, but again, that can be a false look at a person. And the evening of the interview, I was overwhelmed. I am a real stickler for detail on the Constitution, not only what it says, but its implication, its value, the purpose derived. And I've never met anyone, and I with all great sincerity, who understood the Constitution, not just as an academic document, but as a purposeful document. At the end of the interview, I was firmly on Byron Donalds' team. I could not avoid that. These are special times, and we need special people in the House. And Byron Donalds impressed me as being certainly one of those special people.
He impresses me that way as well. And again, it's not necessarily how he would vote. I think you could probably take a number of the candidates who would probably make the right votes in Congress. It's more around his ability to influence others. I believe he can become a spokesperson, not only in Congress to other congressmen and perhaps have a level of influence and persuasion, but also for the American people.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt. There are great politically, technically excellent people. And Byron is in that category also, but he has a persuasive personality, and that certainly has to be coupled with the right positions. But when he speaks, there is an absolute believability. There's an influence, a persuasiveness that I think is absolutely necessary. We're going to be facing some very tough decisions in 2013 forward. I think we need not only someone who's willing to caucus and go into closed rooms, but we need someone who can speak out from that environment to the American people, influence them to understand the issues, understand the problems, understand the shared sacrifice that perhaps has to be made from 2013 forward. And Byron Donalds, and I'm not easily impressed, Bob. I know you're not either, but Byron Donalds was one of the most impressive, not just politicians, but one of the most impressive people I've ever met.
Andrew Joppa, again, former professor at Mercy College in Westchester, New York, and currently a constitutional scholar. Now, let's just give a context for that then. Well, this election is very important. Why, in your view, is it important for us to make the best choices for congressional candidates for 2012?
Bob, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that question.
I apologize. My question is this. Give us a context. Why is it so important today to make the right choices for our candidates going into 2013? My view is we're on kind of a financial or fiscal precipice, and we need to get our house in order. What are your thoughts?
Well, there's no question. I mean, the finances, and one of the issues that came up last Thursday was the relationship of the Constitution to our national debt and deficit spending. It seems rather obvious to me, and I think to Byron Donalds also. I don't want to speak for him, but I think in this context he'll agree that certainly moving outside the Constitution has allowed our national debt to expand, and unless we get back inside the Constitution, that there is absolutely no way of constraining that. Now, Byron is a big advocate of the fair tax. I also think our tax code is certainly complicit in this process. I think he sees the fair tax as he should, which denies the government the absolute unlimited right to take your income. It puts it into a measured category, and I think it puts the government back into a very controlled circumstance, which I think is exactly what we need. So as I said before, Bob, I think these are very special times, and I don't think we have a large window in which to correct the problems of America. I think if we go another year, 2, 3, 4 years deep into the problems we're looking at, I think some problems become intractable at that point. And I think Byron Donalds is sworn in January of 2013. I think would hit the ground running. He's a strong man. He's articulate. I don't think he would back down from the issues that are necessary to turn America around.
You know, Andrew, one of the things I've been most impressed with, too, is he always thinks in the terms of the context of what is the role of government in our lives. And it's not he's not against government. That's certainly not the case. But he understands how the framers thought about government with regard to our individual freedoms and liberty.
Yeah, I think sometimes we use how the framers thought in a very limited context. We see these as the imageries of a certain group of men at a certain point in time over 200 years ago. Actually, they were very studied in the history of government, the history of tyranny, the history of government imposition on people, and so they were forming a document that was a universal statement of the best model in which a people could progress, and that's when we talk about the framers, that's what we're talking about. And Byron speaks constantly of limited government. That doesn't mean no government. It doesn't mean that we don't have a role for government, nor does it mean we don't respect government within that role. But it means that it's critical that government be contained to the role that was designed for it, primarily because that is, if you analyze it, there's no other choice. Once government expands beyond that role, enters into the whim of the moment, then any direction is possible, and that's what we're seeing right now, Bob.
It is indeed, and in fact, it's almost. I can't even imagine that we're waiting for the Supreme Court to make a decision about Obamacare, because it is so invasive in terms of our individual liberties. It is absolutely the wrong approach. Never mind the fact that it's going to be expensive and unwieldy, and it's going to increase our health care costs. It's just totally out of the context of what the framers had in mind.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that that's not obvious. I mean, what you just said. I don't want to diminish what you just said, but it seems extremely obvious that a document that cannot be understood within its specifics, nor can it be understood within the interplay of those specifics as these variables interact under actual implementation, and no one actually knows what this document will do or the impact it will have, except that we know it will increase cost and diminish the quality of health care. To say that a document of that type can be constitutional when its implication in its totality can't be understood is actually incomprehensible to me.
I'd like to just summarize any final thoughts about Byron Donalds, because I'd like to ask you about your Broken Arrow project.
Again, I would like just to add, and just as a personal note, I'm a sort of a cynical guy. I don't have a high degree of political activism in my past. I normally stay away from the direct political process. I have endorsed Byron Donalds, and that's the first time in my life I have actively endorsed a candidate. So this is not a constant part of my way of operating, Bob. This is a rare moment, and I think this Byron Donalds deserves my endorsement. He deserves our endorsement.
I would agree with that. I've endorsed Byron as well. In fact, I'm working actively in his campaign because I think it's just critical that we get Byron in office. I'm going to encourage our listeners to go to ByronDonalds.com. ByronDonalds.com is the website. Take a look at a couple of the videos and just watch the deportment and the ability of this man to express himself. It's really amazing. Also, there are a couple of events coming up, fundraisers. I'm on the host committee. I'm going to encourage you to get in touch with me to find out about them. One is at Sea Salt on the 24th. Another is at the Seasons 52 restaurant on the 29th. And if you'd like to know more, just give me a call. Or go to my website and just send me, it has contact, Bob. You can do that, and I'll certainly get you the information. Tell us about your Broken Arrow project.
Well, again, as we've talked before, Bob, AmericanBrokenArrow.com, I established essentially as a way of positioning the Supreme Court, repositioning it, taking away from its use of precedent, which has displaced the Constitution itself, and move it into its more accurate position of judicial review. For example, as we talked about Obamacare, if it automatically had judicial review and had to assess the constitutionality of this as a proactive statement of the Supreme Court, I think it should have immediately been rejected as unconstitutional. So my primary purpose with AmericanBrokenArrow.com was to ensure that the Constitution, that the Supreme Court did not legislate from the bench, and in fact serve their basic purpose of review, and I think that's a critical function. Recently, it's expanded. I've become far more oriented towards commentary on political events. I think that it's great to develop a long-term philosophy that will be appropriate, as I've tried to do. But I think right now, in between now and November, we have bigger issues on our plate, and I think we've got to be more direct in our attempt to regain the White House, which I think is critical, and electing fine people to the House, such as Byron Donalds.
All right. Now, again, your website is Broken Arrow Project?
AmericanBrokenArrow.com.
AmericanBrokenArrow.com. Andrew, you're a terrific guest. Thank you so much for joining us here on the show.
Thanks again, Bob.
My pleasure indeed. Well, that's a wrap on today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you join us tomorrow. We're going to have some special guests, including Professor Emeritus Gene Landrum of Hodges University. Also, Carson Beadle. He is very knowledgeable. He's a specialist in the area of health care. So we're talking about what happens if Obamacare is overturned by the Supreme Court. I hope you make it a great day on the Paradise Coast. Namaste.
Thanks for listening to The Bob Harden Show on the Bob Harden Broadcasting Network. For more information or requests and for audio files of previous shows, www.bobharden.com.